I look forward to our next conversation with the fireside, but in 2022, we found a way to pull off a fireside chat over Zoom. Grateful that you're hosting. Thank you to everyone for attending. I look forward to the conversation and being able to answer your questions.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to zip through this so we can get right into the conversation. But just for those who need it, understand, please, that in 2014, following 4 years in the state Senate, Congressman Zeldin was elected to the U.S. House, representing New York's 1st congressional district. He serves on 2 committees in the House, Financial Services and Foreign Affairs, where he serves as ranking member of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. Additionally, Congressman Zeldin serves as co-chair of the Long Island Sound Caucus and founding member of the National Estuary Program Caucus, and is one of 2 Jewish Republicans in Congress. Also serves as co-chair of the House Republican Israel Caucus. The format today is going to begin with brief opening remarks, followed by a fireside chat. As the Congressman just mentioned, we're so fortunate to have Shelley Banjo, New York Bureau Chief of Bloomberg, during the honors of moderating. In addition, we have the chat box open. If there's time permitting, there may not be, but if there is, Shelley will or I will jump in with your questions. As a reminder, please know the conversation is on the record, as we do have media on the line. Congressman, if you're ready, we're going to turn it over to you for a few brief remarks and then right into the fireside.
Well, thank you. And looking forward to being able to answer whatever questions that you have today. Obviously, the schedule at this point being 13 days out from the election, we're on the road right now. We just left a press conference. We were at a gas station in Queens where these gas station owners are dealing with daily stories. Someone who was coming to our press conference had a crime committed at his gas station just before he came over, with someone breaking into an ATM. We had a press conference at a gas station where they have a few crimes committed each week. They just had one of their employees assaulted just a few weeks back, earlier this month. And that's where we just came from. Heading to a couple of rallies that we have this evening. We'll have a rally up in Utica, upstate in Oneida County, and then Syracuse in Onondaga County. And it'll be kicking off our Get Out the Vote effort. As far as what I'm hearing on the ground, people are focused on the issues that have them deciding whether or not to stay in the state, family members deciding whether or not to stay in New York. This really has been a campaign to save our state, focused on that breaking point of the attacks on wallets, on safety, on freedom, on education, and the desire of New Yorkers to want to reverse those attacks and to have our state heading in a better direction and to restore balance and common sense to Albany. That's what this campaign has been about. I look forward to our next conversation. Hopefully we'll all be together in person and we'll be able to talk about what's next post-election as we move forward to the next phase of a transition. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's very important to make sure that over these next 13 days, we're working hard on. I'll be focused on the Get Out the Vote effort. You all are you're doing the right thing, obviously, with inviting Kathy Hochul on as well. Hopefully she takes you up on this, and to inform your members and everyone you have in your network and your lives on these issues that matter of most importance to your members. So looking forward to a substantive conversation. Thank you again for hosting, and I'll let you fire away with the first question. Ready to answer anything you have.
Thanks so much, Congressman. I appreciate it. I want to just start off by what's on the minds of at least many of the folks that I talk to, which is how close this race has gotten in the last couple of weeks. So, you look back a couple of months ago, Kathy Hochul had a double-digit lead on you in some of the polls. The most recent polls that have come out show, a quite narrowing 4 points, 5 points, depending on what you're looking at. What changed? What do you think is the biggest thing that's really changed among voters' minds in the last few weeks?
When I got into this race just over 18 months ago, Andrew Cuomo was the governor. Despite that, which was the biggest change in this race that wasn't expected, what was expected was that you're going to get to the end of the campaign in September, October, post-Labor Day. Undecided, independent-minded voters would be, many would be paying attention for the first time, or maybe they're making their final decision. And a lot of New Yorkers are truly independent. And I was assessing when deciding to get into this race that with a state leading the entire nation in population loss and people upset with the direction of the state, that as long as we focus on the issues that matter most importantly to them, that includes economic issues, it includes public safety issues, and other topics of concern I was hearing about. If we focus on those issues, and the Democrats are going to obsess in this race about other items unrelated to the issues that actually matter most, according to New Yorkers, then we're going to be able to win a large majority of these undecided, independent-minded voters. And just as predicted, we get past Labor Day, a very large group of New Yorkers are trying to either first pay attention or finally make up their minds. They have a choice between two different candidates. One is talking about the issues that matter most to them. The other one isn't. And we're coming in with solutions that actually would support law enforcement more, that would roll back pro-criminal laws that have been passed, that would make sure that DAs are actually doing their job. And as just a few of the examples of what are many different issues we've been focused on, I believe that essentially Kathy Hochul has ceded a whole bunch of ground to us by refusing to talk about all of these issues and refusing to be bold, refusing to think big, refusing to talk tough about cracking down on people who are violating the law and targeting law-abiding New Yorkers. And I would actually say a year and a half ago, in many respects, I was predicting that this was going to happen, with obviously the one biggest change in the race, which is who we're running against.
Obviously, crime has been at the center of your campaign. Last night, for anyone who watched the debate that you and the governor had, crime took center stage as part of this debate. It's also worth mentioning that, you know, crime, it remains at pandemic spikes, though still at decades-long lows. What are some practical things that you can do as governor to bring crime down throughout the state? And also in New York City, where it's been a focus?
A few things. One is I have pledged that my first action, the first day that I'm in office, is informing the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg that he's going to be fired. I would like to work with the state legislature for them to come to the table on their own, to understand the will of the people and the desire to make changes to some of these pro-criminal laws that they've passed, such as cashless bail. So far, the state legislative leaders have indicated that they're not willing to do that. So I am going to be forced to bring them to the table. On day one, I will declare a crime emergency in the state. I will suspend cashless bail. The HALT Act, less is more, raise the age, and law changes that were passed a few years ago. That will force them to come to the table. And hopefully we can work together, not as Republicans versus Democrats. It should be Republicans and Democrats and independents, all trying to find common ground however possible, understanding and respecting the will of the New York voter, because I believe it's crystal clear by us winning this election on November 8th that New Yorkers are sending a very strong statement that they want to see a tougher approach on crime, handcuffing criminals as opposed to handcuffing criminal justice. They want to see more support of law enforcement. They want DAs doing their jobs. On our website, you see the plan that we rolled out last year, the Secure Our Streets plan. It's at zeldinfornewyork.com/secure-our-streets. And I believe very strongly that the couple dozen or so proposals you see there, plus other aspects of this that I've been talking about and other aspects I've been focused on, are all ideas that New Yorkers very strongly want to see Albany pursuing so that we can take back our streets.
The legislature takes a long time to move and to change, though. What do you think you can do when you first come to office? What comes under the idea of declaring a state of emergency, and is it deploying more cops, which we've seen over the last year not actually make that much of a difference? Or, are there other kind of things that you can tell people you'll see a difference, within the first year of me being in office?
Well, we have to hire more cops. And it's not just cops. I mean, to hire more corrections officers. Excuse me. The NYPD has seen a depletion of its ranks. The corrections officers have seen a big depletion of their ranks. And when you talk about deploying more law enforcement in one particular area, you're pulling them from some other area. If you're talking about mandatory forced overtime, for one, it ends up costing a lot. But two, you have people who are already stretched thin. They are shouldering a bigger burden because others have decided to put their retirement packages in or just to leave the force early. So we have to hire more law enforcement. So the aspect really of approaching this is primarily threefold. One is the changes that we're proposing, the pro-criminal laws that have been passed. Secondly is to make sure that DAs are actually enforcing the law. And the third piece is supporting our men and women in law enforcement. Right now, they are under attack in many respects. And I would say that the highest profile dynamic of what we can do on offense is hiring more law enforcement. It needs to get done. The NYPD is the greatest law enforcement organization in the history of the world. But their job is becoming harder and harder when you pass laws like attacking qualified immunity and some of the other laws that they're passing that's just making it harder for them to be able to do their jobs and depleting their rank. And hiring more law enforcement means not only more people in uniform, but also more people in plain clothes. And these are all priorities of mine. But it's not about Albany dictating to the NYPD how the NYPD does its job. They know how to do their job. They just need more help.
One of the reasons why crime is on the minds of many of the folks who are tuned in today is because of its hindrance on New York's economy. We've seen a remarkable growth since the pandemic. However, unemployment rate in the state is higher than the rest of the country. And now both the state comptroller and the city comptroller are warning of storm clouds ahead. What do you think is going to be the first thing that you're going to do in office to kind of guard against what could be quite a big softening of the economy or even a recession?
I mean, there's a lot of things, but first and foremost, we spend so much money. There's just no cap to it. There should be a state spending cap. The biggest benefit would have come if that state spending cap was implemented over these past few years. These massive federal bailouts, these one shots have come from the federal government to the state. And that's an opportunity to look at this long term. So, for example, you take out a massive multi-billion-dollar federal unemployment insurance loan. The principal is going to become due, and you get a huge federal bailout, actually multiple federal bailouts, and you have a choice. You can spend that money to pay down that balance, or you can spend it on new goodies because you have an election coming up, and you can't possibly ever spend enough, and everyone is able to give out goodies to their own districts. But what happens when you're not responsible with the money, when you don't pay down the principal, is that the Department of Labor in the middle of 2022 will send a letter out to all business owners letting them know that the state is passing the buck on to them. And at the beginning of September, they are all going to pay an unemployment insurance fee to pay this loan off. So it was just so irresponsible. So having a state spending cap, bringing spending under control, we have to certainly ensure that Medicaid is operating more efficiently. There are billions of dollars to be able to save there. There's a whole lot of specifics that come with how to do that. I've been talking about on the trail. I outlined some of those specifics at the press gaggle after last night's debate. And a lot of the media was there as I went through some of those details. We have to level the playing field, stop picking winners and losers in business based on political calculations, stop picking industries that we're just going to attack the entire industry. Right now, the state has a ban on the safe extraction of natural gas. The state should reverse that ban. The Southern Tier is desperate for it. We should be approving new pipeline applications. We shouldn't have been blocking Williams Pipeline. We should have been trying to figure out how to get Amazon's 25,000 good paying jobs here. We should be making sure that we're improving the business climate, having more pro-business people in charge of state agencies so that you don't have to essentially bribe businesses with billions of dollars in tax incentives in order to get them to move to New York. In Texas, they don't have to bribe businesses to get to Texas. Those businesses just want to move to Texas because it's a more friendlier business climate. On the economic front, there is extraordinary opportunity in the state to better control state spending, look long-term, implement a state spending cap, bring down taxes on the individual side. I don't believe that there should be an estate tax in the state. I believe that income taxes should come down across the board. I believe that there's opportunity not just on the corporate side, but especially on the individual side, and the disdain and resentment that people in government have towards these businesses, not viewing them as the engines of the economy, not viewing them as employers, really is massively backfiring. And there are entire communities that are being gutted upstate. As I'm getting ready shortly after this call is over to get on a plane, and I have to fly up for a rally, 2 rallies that I have this evening. I'm going to visit communities over the course of these next 13 days that I've spent a lot of time in the past, and they're really struggling, many of these areas.
If you are elected, however, you're going to come in at a time when the economy is going to be going down, the money going in to the budget is going to be harder to come by. How are you going to pull off, reducing state taxes, getting rid of an estate tax, and funding all, the things you talked about regarding, law enforcement and, adding more staff and things like that?
Well, listen, for one, if the state didn't have a ban on the, excuse me, if the state didn't have a ban on the safe extraction of natural gas, I'm using that as an example of one industry where the southern tier is desperate to be able to tap into it. There are other counties that also want to be able to tap into it as well. You're talking about generating jobs and creating revenue, and to be able to revitalize communities as more people are working, as you have more people who are just employed, more businesses that are here growing, not leaving, more businesses moving into New York. That has to be viewed as the number one opportunity that exists for us to be able to broaden the tax base. It shouldn't be about raising taxes to be able to pay for any priority. It should be about having more people working here, having people stay. We lead the entire nation in population loss. We have to get to the heart of why that is, and that's not all economic, factoring into why people are making that decision to leave the state. I have people every single day tell me, Lee, if you don't win, I'm leaving. There are a lot of people who are planning to exit New York based on the decision of their fellow New Yorkers in 13 days. Also, on top of it is bringing spending under control. Now, I'll just give you a couple examples. As I was mentioning last night, when I was with the media following the debate, and I was talking about Medicaid, the conversion to managed long-term care. It was something that was done a little over a decade ago. You had the race to sign up healthy people. And then when the New York Times was reporting on how you had one entity taking advantage of the system, then it was suspended for them to sign up healthy people. But because of political pressure, they then temporarily suspended anyone signing up because they were racing to sign up healthy people. This was known that you had these entities cheating the system. So the Medicaid redesign team too, under Andrew Cuomo, was proposing to fix that. Good. That's something that I supported, but that's something that still hasn't been implemented. We're talking about billions of dollars. There are individuals who take advantage of both the nonprofit and for-profit laws to be able to cheat the Medicaid system. Medicaid doesn't exist to make someone 7 or 8 figures extra off of cheating the Medicaid system, but that's exactly what is happening there as well. So when you go look through that list, and I'm using Medicaid as the example because that's the biggest ticket item in our entire state budget. If you need to come up with billions of dollars, you could do it just in Medicaid.
One big issue that has been draining a lot of resources in the state is the MTA. It's struggling to make up for money lost during the pandemic, steep declines of ridership. The MTA depends a lot on ridership for their budget. You've talked about your opposition to congestion pricing. How are you going to how are you going to shore up the MTA? And, many governors for many decades have talked about improving transit, and we have not really seen any governor take a real substantial approach to fixing the region's transit system. What is something that you are willing to do, and why are you against congestion pricing?
Well, I mean, New Yorkers struggling to make ends meet already have to deal with gas, tolls, parking. There is an expense that a lot of New Yorkers feel like they can't afford as is. Now you want to hit them with a congestion pricing breaking point, only going to be one step closer to leaving. If you want to get more people back into the city working, this doesn't help. You can look at the environmental review. The irony, it's called congestion pricing. You have impacts similar to some of the negative impacts London experienced. You're seeing the reports showing that there'll be more truck traffic on the Cross Bronx Expressway. There'll be more truck traffic on the Staten Island Expressway. There'll be more cars traveling on small side streets in Brooklyn and Queens as they try to get different routes to be able to avoid paying the fee. I believe that the amount of money that's being estimated for the MTA is not accurate because exemptions are going to get passed around like candy. The dollar figure they put to the congestion pricing tax is based on an aspirational number that absolutely will never be hit because of the exemptions that definitely will be getting passed out. I oppose congestion pricing. I would do everything in my power to stop it. If you're looking at two very important ways to generate a fortune for the MTA, one is improve ridership, improve the rider experience, make it safer. You have people who are changing their personal behavior because they believe that they aren't safe. They see that the violent felonies are up. They're seeing the videos of people being pushed in front of oncoming subway cars. They don't feel safe on the subway platform. They're emotionally disturbed persons who are traveling, who are confrontational. They don't feel safe. Their times have changed when they ride it. Maybe they take off their yarmulke or their Sikh and they're concerned about riding with a turban on. These are real life concerns and fears that people have. And if we're able to address it, that's a lot of money for the MTA. Secondly, it's absolutely crazy to me that as part of Alvin Bragg's day one memo, he came in and said he was not going to enforce fare jumping. There are all sorts of other crimes that are being committed from people who are jumping fares. And on top of it, hundreds of millions of dollars for the MTA. Fare jumping is now increased to double digits. It used to be very low single digits just a few years back. Enforcing fare jumping can bring hundreds of millions of dollars into the MTA as well. So, listen, I know we have a lot of questions, short answers, but as far as very important top lines to consider in this conversation, I believe that it's important to understand that the dollar amount being put to congestion pricing isn't accurate. We have to improve the ridership experience, make it safer, more people will ride it. If we enforce fare jumping, we just have people paying their $275 or however else they want to pay for a pass. It's just really important for people to be paying their share. And by the way, if somebody can't afford the MTA, there's a decision being made that an individual needs to get a free ride. Well, they don't have to jump a fare. You could give them a card that has a credit on it so that they can swipe their card just like everybody else. The idea that you're just going to allow them to jump it, that causes all sorts of extra issues.
Both of those would make an impact, but certainly not be enough to really shore up the finances of the MTA. Is there something else that could help?
Sure, absolutely. Overtime costs, consultant contracts, the vendor contracts are something to look at. Some of the capital expenses that get made. I remember writing an op-ed in the New York Post over a decade ago when Jay Walder was coming in. It was an MTA to-do list. It was 10 items on that list. When you look at some of the items on that list, you say, wow, we're actually still not doing that today. Think of all the money that would have been saved had we implemented some of these recommendations earlier. And it's And it's important to have someone in charge of the MTA with the boldness and courage to be able to tackle this head on. And what's happening is that you have people who are in charge of the MTA who put their hand out, and as far as crying wolf, they'll tell the federal government, if you give us, $5 billion, it'll make all of our wildest dreams come true, and we'll never have to ask for anything else ever again. They get the billions of dollars that they asked for, and then the next day they put their hand out and they say, well, actually, we need billions of dollars more. And if you give us this, I promise you, this will be the last time I ever ask, and it'll make all of your wildest dreams come true. I'll never ask again. You give it to them, and then they ask again. So there's a money pit aspect to the financing of the MTA as well. And that's something that expenditures long term, it's a money pit, and there's just no accountability for it. And I really feel like that the MTA just needs to be operated better financially.
So would you install new leadership then?
100%, absolutely. I wish I could do it today.
And on the crime issue.
Yeah, and I would. There's one thing that I'm looking for. I don't care which party you're at. This has nothing to do with whether or not you support my campaign. It has nothing to do with any of that. What I care about in the entire planet, if there's a single person somewhere who fits the bill as the most qualified person, we need that person to sit in that seat today.
And just one last follow-up on that. You mentioned the crime issue on the subways. The New York City mayor and the governor have put in at least 1,200 more cops, increased overtime during the last year, and that doesn't seem to be making a difference. So what will make a difference there?
Well, first off, hiring more cops is different than moving cops from one location to another location. These cops are already stretched thin. They are being pulled from one beat where they're needed to another. Mandatory forced overtime, it comes with the overtime expenses. It also impacts the burden of police officers who are already working really hard. They're already being asked to do a lot, now being asked to do this as well. I saw one concern expressed that there were people who were being moved from Long Island Railroad and Metro North. That's something we're looking into. That came from someone connected to the MTA. So we're trying to get more information on that. But then all of a sudden you have less people in the Long Island Railroad and Metro North. There's a reason why they were on the Metro North and the Long Island Railroad. And no one is claiming that there are too many people there ensuring safety on those lines. It has been told to me that when this announcement was made just a few days ago, not coincidentally, the day after a bad poll for the governor came out and 2.5 weeks before an election, where they're talking about having more law enforcement at subways. I was told that this caught the MTA law enforcement leadership off guard, and there was no plan to implement it. It was just basically waking up one day and having a conference because there wasn't a plan that was being developed over the course of time. And again, that's something else we're looking into that was told to us from somebody closely connected to the MTA. So we're looking into that as well. The governor was talking about how that they know all the emotionally disturbed persons and that they need to remove them off of the subways. And okay, so you have my attention. I've been talking about this as well. She then talks about how this plan was going to get implemented with 50 beds, not 500 beds, not 5,000 beds, with 50 beds. So it shows just how completely divorced from reality that she is, that you think that this is going to barely scratch the surface by thinking that what we're witnessing on the streets and subways of New York City is being caused by 50 emotionally disturbed people who need to be taken off the streets. So there's just a lot more that needs to get done. And this is something that shouldn't be done because an election is 2 weeks away. It should have been done a year ago, and it's only getting worse. Very predictably, it will only continue to get worse until you see boldness. You know, they say cameras, cares, camera, care, and cop. The fourth thing is cuffs. You talk about locking up people who are committing crimes, and the catch and release, the prosecutors refusing to enforce the law, cashless bail, less is more, the list goes on. This all needs to get dealt with. You can't ignore that.
And I want to change tack real quick before we run out of time to talk about the influx of migrants coming from Central and South America into New York City and across New York State. A lot of talk has been to ask, why isn't there a federal solution to this? And yet it's really upon the local leaders right now to deal with the issues on the ground. Besides there being some sort of federal, magic wand there fixing immigration problems, what can you do as a governor if you are elected in a few weeks?
Well, I'll tell you the two biggest things that the governor should have been doing and hasn't been doing. And the list is not exhaustive. These are the first couple of items that are really important to New Yorkers and also needed to actually solve it. One is that New Yorkers are demanding just more answers, more transparency. They saw the flights coming to Westchester, then Stewart, then Montgomery. You see the buses coming in. New Yorkers want to know who's coming, where they're coming from, where they're going to. They're not getting the answers. It's clouded in secrecy. And a lot of New Yorkers are upset by that. The governor waited until the first bus arrived. Then she had her red state boogeyman and she starts talking about it. These flights were coming in for many months. That level of transparency is absolutely necessary. And regardless of what anyone on this call or myself or you might feel about it, the reality is that a lot of New Yorkers are demanding it. So therefore, that's something that is important. New Yorkers want it. Secondly, and I know that you said on top of what the federal government does, what's fascinating about this entire issue is that it's most important, really, what the federal government needs to do today. And if you solve this, let's just say red city, red state, blue state, all mayors, governors, everyone was 1,000% on the same page to solve this today. It can't actually get solved because you have to deal with what's going on in our southern border. So the governor needs to pick up the phone and specifically call on President Biden to do the following 5 things. And I believe to secure our southern border, we need to finish construction of the border wall, end catch and release, enforce the Remain in Mexico policy, stop incentivizing and rewarding illegal entry, and to also make sure that instead of these attacks being carried out on Customs and Border Patrol agents, you should be supporting them. They're being stretched thin as well. If the federal government was stepping in and doing these 5 things, I feel like you and I would be having a very, very different conversation. Unfortunately, this is the reality. Mayor Adams is being dealt this hand, and he's, trying to deal with this situation. I would say that from the state and city level, there are some sanctuary state, sanctuary city policies that incentivize and reward illegal entry. That if it was being dealt with at the state and city level, that would help. For example, giving you one example, the New York City Council had passed a new law that said that hundreds of thousands of non-citizens would be allowed to vote in next year's election. And a court decided recently that wasn't allowed. In my opinion, it's unconstitutional, violates the principle of one person, one vote, a principle that belongs to United States citizens. I give you that as an example of a city policy that was pushed. At the state level, you see it with the green light law, where federal law enforcement wouldn't be allowed to get into DMV records, to be able to just do their job. And I think that that's wrong. That's just an example of one of many. State are being offered. So I believe the state can do more to stop incentivizing, rewarding illegal entry, just like the city does and just like the federal government does. But first and foremost, the transparency that's being demanded, and the federal government absolutely needs to lead, or certainly it's impossible to have it solved.
Thank you so much. I want to hand it back over to Barbara, and thank you so much for your time.
Got it. Thank you for yours.
Yeah, many thanks to you both. Shelley, great conversation, great questions, and Congressman, thank you. We know how busy you are. We're so glad you were able to fit this in. Our members and guests really appreciate it. Best of luck to you, sir, throughout the race. And again, we'll keep folks posted. Hopefully Governor Osho will confirm soon, and we'll get that word to you as soon as it comes. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to having you with us again soon. Thank you. Take care.